I'd like to show you another game that won one of the best game prizes at the ACO World Amateur Championship held in Kos in May. These ACO tournaments are really great fun. Do check out the link below. There are tournaments coming up in October in Crete and in May 2024 on Kos. They combine a chess tournament with a holiday, really relaxed atmosphere. I'm one of the grandmasters giving analysis of the games and giving seminars. 5-star hotel, swimming pools, beach. Just go for it. Great fun. Anyway, if you want more details, the link to the website is down below there. Let's crack on with this game. So this was actually played in the lowest section. So all the players in this section were rated under 1200. So be forgiving over some of the decisions that were made. Nevertheless, I thought this game was worthy of a best game prize because I really like the single-mindedness with which White plays this game. Right, so with White, Benno Gerlach, who lives in Berlin, and Viktor Somogyi, who is Hungarian. Right, normal start, but now Benno plays c3. So this is the centuries-old Ponziani opening. Well, idea is pretty straightforward. You want to play d4 and establish a big centre. So why isn't this seen very often at the highest levels? Well, basically, I've pointed out 3 moves. d5, f5, knight f6. Well, d5 and knight f6 are the most reliable. Basically, black can equalise pretty easily after these moves. And I think the problem with knight f6 is that after d4, this leads to positions where it's a little bit sterile. This is a well-known recipe for black to deal with this opening. But you can still play like that. I noticed Nakamura and Duda playing this in the last few years, even normally in rapid play games. But anyway, c3 played, and here I think this is actually very typical of a lot of games I see at sort of quite low levels. That one player has a kind of set routine. They'd obviously been taught, okay, after bishop c4, I go bishop c5. And they continued with their bishop c5 move, even though c3 has been played. And also, of course, that changes everything because White is able to gain a whole tempo by attacking the bishop. So not the best of starts for black. Nevertheless, after the check and then d5, he's found his feet again. This isn't so bad for black. Now, I think White's next move is kind of a question of taste. You could just take here and play bishop e2 and get castled. But e5, basically that defines the game. White has a very clear idea in mind of attacking on the king side. And of course, when you have this 4 against 3 pawn majority, that pawn on e5 gives you a kind of spearhead for the kingside attack. And that was absolutely practically the only thing in White's mind, actually. Let's see what happens. Knight e7. Bishop g5, quite a provocative move. With a pin there, that can have some effect. And black castles. And White decides to play h3. That's a very careful move. I think you all know by now when I think of these little pawn moves at the side of the board. Here I kind of understand it actually, because black has this idea, bishop g4, which it could have been played on the last move actually, which puts a little bit of pressure on White's centre. I mean, I find it a bit too careful. Nevertheless, it does secure the position of knight, which secures the pawn on d4. Black has a problem here. That knight blocks the c pawn, so it's difficult to get counterplay. So h3 played, bishop f5, good move. That's a nice diagonal for the bishop. And bishop d3 looks to exchange off that strongly placed bishop. I think if I were black here, I would probably play queen d7. I think exchanging is a bit too cooperative. You know, that's a really nice diagonal for the queen. h6. Here's an interesting moment. Which way would you move the bishop? Well, you don't want to exchange it off. No. That kind of makes life a bit easy for black. Bishop h4 is reasonable. But then queen d7 just avoids the pin. Bishop d2 I think is a very interesting idea because you see with that pawn on h6 that's potentially a bit of a target. So I think that's a clever retreat actually rather than maintaining the pin. And I do think that black should be playing queen d7 and even potentially queen f5 to match that queen. But instead, knight a5. Well, black is going for counterplay on the queen side. Let's see how white deals with that. Castles. a6. What did I say about these little pawn moves? This gives white time to build up. Knight c4 straight away was better. Gives white time to build up. Rook a1. Great move. Very interesting. Leaving that rook on f1, even though it doesn't appear to be very active. Well, it isn't very active at the moment, but player of the white pieces recognizes that rook on f1 has potential, and he was absolutely right. So it's a very single-minded way of playing. He wants to attack on the king side. Knight c4. Well, this is a very interesting moment because white has an opportunity. Can you spot that tactical opportunity here? Very typical idea when you have bishops lined up like this with a knight in between. Knight takes d5 is possible because there's a little Zwischenzug you can play after bishop takes bishop. You can throw in a knight check and then take here. So what do we think about this position? Well, white has won a pawn, but there is a bit of pressure here. Then again, you know, white can start to build an attack on the king side. So white could have won a pawn, but it's not so clear. I mean, there are other ways of playing as well. White wins a pawn every time. This might be a better way of playing it, actually. Rook d8. You know, there is potential counterplay here. Now, I don't know whether that was just not seen or intentionally rejected, but the way white plays is really good. Bishop c1. In fact, white does have a very strong attacking position on the king side. So black lashes out, needs counterplay. a3, good move, because after the exchange, well, that kind of bolsters white's centre. Rook c8. Now, how are you going to pursue white's attack in this position? Perhaps you'd like to have a little think. I'll have a slurp of tea. You have a little think. White to play. How are you going to get this attack going? Well, you could play f6, but I think black would just block that out with f6. Then it's not so easy to see how white makes progress. But e6 is possible, though. But I like this. Exchange on c5 and knight d4. Aha! Here we go. With the rook on f1 supporting the steamroller of the f and e pawns. A classic theme. Queen a5. And, well, instead of f4 immediately, queen g3. I like that. The queen swings over towards the king side, threatening bishop takes h6. So king h7. I mean, I think black's position is pretty dubious. Let's see what happens. Oh yeah, incidentally, I mean, queen g3, I think is a good move. But white could have simply fought queen and rook and then taken here. It would lose the initiative. Queen g3 works out perfectly, but yeah, one needs to point that out. But white clearly only had eyes for the king side, and it works beautifully. Here we go. I mean, in a way, this rook, or these pieces, are just irrelevant. they just get in the way. You know, why bother? I mean, in fact, that knight is stronger than the rook on c5 because it's contributing to the attack on the king side. It's blocking out black's pieces. Knight takes a3. That's extravagant. That is extravagant. I wonder how black's king feels about this knight grabbing the pawn way over on the other side of the board. Rook f3, so that defends the pawn here. And one never knows, the rook might be able to contribute to the attack. Knight b5, again an attack here, so that gets exchanged off. And f5, the steamroller, beautiful. Supported by the rooks, everything is wonderful. I mean, it's clear that white's attack is breaking through. Knight c6, f6, threatening mate in 1. g6, bishop takes. This is just like an avalanche, blowing away black's king side. That's taken. Queen h4 mate. Queen h4 anyway. Rook b8. Well, okay, who knows what's happening with these moves. And of course, bishop g7 and queen h8 is mate straight away. But instead we have another checkmate with bishop f4 and then queen h6 and mate next move. Well, Benno Gerlach played, I think, with a very clear plan right from the start. You know, very consistently played. Established a strong centre with that move e5. And then everything flowed from that, actually. That was the spearhead. And everything white did, you know, moves like rook e1, contributed to this wonderful steamroller of an attack with those f and e pawns. Excellent game. So there we go. I'm gonna show you one more best game